What if I told you that the fear of debt, the very thing we're taught is responsible and safe, is actually the biggest obstacle keeping you from achieving financial freedom? The world's wealthiest individuals and nations didn't get rich by saving. They got rich by borrowing. Today, you're going to learn their secrets. Imagine borrowing $1 million, investing it, and creating a passive income stream that not only pays back the loan, but also funds your life. It sounds absurd, but this is the fundamental principle the rich use every day to build their empires. Stick with me, because today you'll learn how to stop fearing debt and start using it as a tool. How do you go from being in debt to achieving financial freedom? Imagine this. If you have 10 friends and each one lends you $100,000, you will immediately have $1 million in hand. Even if you just take this money and invest it at a stable interest rate of 5% per year, you will generate an additional $50,000 in passive income. In the end, you can repay the borrowed money along with a little interest to your friends and keep the difference. It sounds absurd, maybe even reckless, right? But let me tell you, this world has countless attractive money-making projects, but in the end, most of them operate on this very principle of borrowing money that you might consider ridiculous. Because the way to make big money is never separate from the intelligent use of borrowed money. Wealth Top Max warmly welcomes you. This channel is dedicated to sharing wealth-building mindsets for those seeking financial and time freedom. If you don't want to miss out on future valuable insights, consider subscribing for free and turning on the notification bell. Just think for a moment, is there any truly rich person who has no debt? We don't even need to discuss individuals, just look at entire countries. Which developed country doesn't carry huge debts on its shoulders? The United States itself has a national debt that is almost incomprehensibly large. Have you ever noticed that for all wealthy people or prosperous nations, their assets are almost always proportional to the debt they carry? The more debt they have, the richer they seem to become. That means understanding money and using debt intelligently is a critical skill that we must learn in our lifetime, because it not only helps us quickly multiply our assets many times over, but more importantly, it can also save our lives in times of crisis. If you have never borrowed money and don't think there is anyone around who can lend to you, then what will you do when your family suddenly needs a large sum of money for a medical emergency and you don't have enough in your pocket? Do you think you can borrow money just based on your talent? If you were really that talented, why doesn't your bank account already have 7 or 8 figures in it? Many people will immediately say that borrowing money is a very high risk, but who told you that? Was it your teachers or your parents? A person who has never learned about the strategic use of debt telling you that borrowing money is very risky is like a person who has never driven a car telling you that driving is very dangerous. All the risks in this world stem from a lack of understanding. When you do something without having learned how to do it properly, it is indeed very risky. But today, I will definitely teach my children and grandchildren how to drive safely, and I will also definitely teach them how to borrow money intelligently. Because if you don't know how to drive, even giving you a Ferrari is useless. And if you don't know how to manage debt, no matter how large an inheritance your family leaves you, it is ultimately meaningless. Since I was young, I was taught the conventional wisdom. Don't lend money to anyone and don't borrow money from others. Therefore, for years, I always thought that debt was just a pure expense because you have to pay interest. More importantly, I thought, when a person has nothing, who would be willing to lend them money? Because of that thinking, I always considered myself quite foolish in my early years. I started from scratch, launched my own business to earn my first capital, then invested in stocks to expand that capital before re-entering the world of business. For years, I had never been in debt and had not even thought about borrowing money. I had read the book Rich Dad, Poor Dad, where it says to buy assets and stay away from debt. At that time, I read the book and just followed that advice on the surface, without truly understanding the deeper meaning behind it. Later, when I reread the book along with other financial materials, I realized I had completely misunderstood a fundamental concept. The author, Robert Kiyosaki, didn't tell us to stay away from all debt. He urged us to stay away from bad debt and to strategically take advantage of good debt. That moment was like an awakening for me. Currently, I am in debt to the bank, and this debt continues to grow, but I sleep better than anyone. Why? Because I have used that debt to acquire multiple income-producing assets. I have employees helping me with my work, and I have built a network of people who believe in me. I have never been hounded for debt. In fact, my creditors wish me more and more success because my success ensures their success. Learning to borrow money is a skill that anyone who wants to achieve significant success must have. Before I learned this, my thinking was framed by a lack of money and a sense of fear, which led to me missing countless opportunities to get rich. I don't want my followers to make the same mistake, to be held back by a lack of financial thinking and the ambition to conquer the world. Therefore, if you watch this video to the end, you will understand what good debt is. More importantly, you will know how to use good debt to achieve true financial freedom. Since we were young, we were taught that being debt-free is a light burden, that we must save every penny, and that starting a business is far too risky. But why do most people believe in that? It's simple. In the old days, to start a business, you had to open a factory, like the great industrialists of the past. Most people, when starting a business, had to borrow money from friends and relatives, then use that money to build a factory, buy expensive equipment, and hire workers. At that time, everyone thought that if the factory didn't make money, that debt could not be repaid. If you couldn't repay the debt, the creditors would come to your house to demand it, and the shame would be unbearable. That's why people concluded that saving was the safe way, while starting a business was too far-fetched. But what is the reality of our modern economy? In reality, employees are, in a way, the creditors of the boss. Because employees deposit their savings in the bank, and the boss then borrows that exact money from the bank to open a company. The entrepreneur uses this money to build a business and hire those very employees to work, generating profits. When there are profits, the entrepreneur borrows more money from the bank to expand and hire more people. In the end, the profits and the equity in the company all belong to the entrepreneur, while the salaries paid to employees eventually return to the banking system and continue to be borrowed by other entrepreneurs. So, is starting a business really that risky? We often see many companies go bankrupt. The reason they go bankrupt is because they have too much debt that they cannot repay. At that point, the company's assets are liquidated. But what about the business owners? They often still live in their villas and drive their nice cars. Why? Because in the American system, a corporation's assets and the owner's personal assets are two completely separate legal accounts. This is called limited liability. As long as they haven't committed fraud, they don't have to use their personal assets to pay the company's debts. Look at the 2008 financial crisis. When Lehman Brothers and a series of Wall Street financial companies collapsed, do you think their senior executives are now so poor they have nothing to eat? The truth is, before the company went bankrupt, many of them had already paid themselves exorbitant salaries and bonuses. When their companies collapsed, they even received huge bailouts from the government. So how big is the risk of borrowing, really? It depends on who is doing the borrowing. When the financial crisis erupted, many ordinary Americans went bankrupt, losing their homes and their life savings. But what about the American financial system itself? The capitalists remained calm, simply packaged up the bad debts, and had the government and the Federal Reserve rescue the system. After a short period, the U.S. economy recovered quickly, and the world's money flowed back into the pockets of Americans. When the US Federal Reserve is printing money seemingly without limit, why do you insist on only saving? In many ways, saving is the biggest scam orchestrated by the banks. Not to mention your money is constantly depreciating due to inflation. Just look at the reality of the numbers. If you deposit $1 million in the bank, each year you might only receive $20,000 in interest. But if someone who doesn't understand borrowing goes and borrows $1 million from that same bank for a personal loan or credit card debt, they might have to pay up to $100,000 in interest. Most people think that the bank only earns $80,000 from this interest rate spread, but in reality, their profit is much, much higher. Why? Because they use financial leverage. Simply put, if today you borrow $1 million to buy a house, the bank will not give you cash. Instead, they will transfer $1 million to the home seller's account. The seller checks their phone, sees their account has an extra $1 million, and hands the house over to you. But in reality, this money is still within the banking system. It has just moved from one account to another. The bank still holds that $1 million in deposits, which it can then use to lend out again and again. Financial leverage is a mandatory skill for the rich. It is the secret to how they can make a lifetime's worth of money in just a few strategic moves. So what is good debt, and how do you actually make money from it? Listen carefully. Let's look at a case study of an airline. Imagine an airline company that only had a little over $1 million in starting capital. With that amount of money, you can't really buy a commercial airplane. But they were able to raise $30 to $40 million from investors, just enough to buy one airplane. However, instead of buying it right away, they took this money to the bank, made a down payment to buy 2 airplanes, and agreed to pay the rest in installments. Of course, the bank agreed, because this mechanism is just like getting a mortgage to buy a house. If the company can't repay the debt, the bank will simply repossess the airplanes and sell them. The result is that the airline only needed the money for 1 airplane, but was able to acquire 2. While everyone thought that was a great strategy, the company continued to approach other banks and investors, saying, "Our planes are flying in the sky every day, and the number of passengers is always full. In 3 years, we can achieve a profit of $60 to $70 million. Then they made an incredible offer. Our profits for the next 3 years will belong entirely to you, the investors. You just need to invest $50 million now, and after 3 years, you will receive $60 to $70 million back." The investors heard this and thought, investing $50 million now to get $60 to $70 million back in 3 years is a pretty stable return. So they agreed to invest. As a result, this airline immediately had $50 million in cash in hand. They took this money back to the bank to continue borrowing more, constantly repeating this process and using that method to eventually buy 200 airplanes. At the same time, they had sold all their profits for the next 3 years to their investors. This is how capital works at the highest level. First, you borrow money to buy an asset. Then you sell the future profits of that asset to other investors or banks. But in the end, the asset itself, the airplanes, still belongs to you. Then you use the cash flow from the business to slowly pay off the initial debt to the bank. Therefore, good debt is debt that someone else helps you pay. I have practiced this method many times in my own real estate investments. In the past, I had about $1 million. A nice house at that time also cost about $1 million. The conventional wisdom would be to buy one house with cash and be debt-free. But instead, I only took $500,000 to make a down payment and borrowed from the bank to buy 2 houses. I used the money for one house to acquire 2. The rest of the money I used to pay taxes and other closing costs. At this point, many people might worry, "Now I don't have much cash left. What if I can't pay the debt? The bank will take my houses." But why wouldn't you be able to pay the debt? Because you're afraid of losing your job, afraid of your business failing, afraid of a financial crisis. But why be afraid? Because you never thought about renting out the houses to have the tenants help you pay the debt. The real property owners, the ones with huge portfolios, are the ones who buy houses specifically to rent them out. It's the same with my 2 houses. The monthly rent I collect is more than enough to pay the bank loan. Later, when the value of the houses doubled, did I sell them? No. I simply went back to the bank and borrowed more money against my new equity. In the past, when a house was worth $1 million, I could borrow $500,000. But now that the value of the house has increased to $2 million, I can borrow a few $100,000 more. I then use that money to make a down payment on another property, and so on, continuing to expand my investment portfolio. This is the cycle of using good debt. But to play this game, you must have one crucial asset: credit worthiness. Your relationships and your reputation are money. Ordinary people cannot play according to this model. First, if you don't have collateral, the bank won't lend you money. So you can only find investors to raise capital. But sadly, most people around you can't even borrow $10,000 from their friends. Therefore, I only associate with people who are beneficial to my business and my financial growth. And friends are like credit cards. If you don't use them regularly and responsibly, they are not a resource for you. I always maintain my relationships with friends and investors to ensure that whenever an opportunity appears, I have enough resources and capital to seize it. Ask yourself, what is your credit value? Try borrowing money from your friends and see how much they are willing to lend you. That amount is your current credit value. Trust is something that needs to be nurtured over time. So, if this is good debt, what is bad debt? It's how most ordinary people understand debt. For example, you borrow money on a high-interest credit card to buy a designer bag or a luxury vacation. Not only do you have to pay the debt, but the item you bought is losing value every single day. That is bad debt. I know there are many people stuck in a cycle of bad debt and feel extremely miserable. I understand that feeling. If you really cannot repay your debt, then listen seriously to my following 6 pieces of advice. These are methods to help you get back on your feet. First, don't run away. Running away is the most foolish thing to do. Once you run away, you have destroyed your reputation, and it will be very difficult to borrow money or gain trust from others in the future. Second, do not cut off contact. If a creditor calls to find you, you must always answer the phone. If they want to meet, you must go and meet them. Be respectful and transparent. Third, don't let them lose faith in you. You need to let them know that you are not hiding, that they can see what you are doing. If you have nothing left to sell, at least show them that you are trying to change, and that your only goal is to find a way to repay them. Fourth, be responsible. Don't make excuses or procrastinate. Have only one goal: to work hard to earn money to repay the debt. This means you must work non-stop, cut out all extravagant spending, and still regularly pay a small portion of the debt each month, no matter how small. Fifth, be proactive. Most people in debt tend to avoid their creditors. This is the most foolish action. You can owe money, but you cannot owe your reputation. If you owe someone, you must be the one to proactively remind them of your debt. State clearly how much you still owe, what you are doing to earn money, and what your repayment plan is. Sixth, seek opportunities. Even while in debt, if you find a genuine investment opportunity, you can still rely on your newfound reputation to try to borrow more money from your creditors. Why? Because if they lend you more to help you recover, they not only have a chance to get their original money back, but can also make a profit from your new venture. Conversely, if they don't lend to you, that other debt might be lost forever. So let's bring this all together. The fear of debt is a mindset that keeps people financially trapped. The wealthy, on the other hand, understand that there are two kinds of debt. Bad debt, which is used for consumption and makes you poorer, and good debt, which is used to acquire income-producing assets and makes you richer. The key to financial freedom is to minimize or eliminate bad debt while intelligently using good debt and leverage to build your asset portfolio. This involves buying assets like real estate or businesses where tenants or customers help you pay off the debt, all while you retain ownership of the appreciating asset. This requires building your creditworthiness, nurturing relationships, and having the courage to think differently than you were taught. Debt is a powerful tool. In the wrong hands, it is destructive, but in the right hands, it is the single fastest path to wealth. Thank you for joining us here at Wealth Top Max. We hope this has given you a valuable new perspective on the power of debt. Don't forget to subscribe for notifications, and we will see you in the next video.